Uh, why are nuclear plants now so expensive to build? And how did they become so expensive? And what can be done about it?
Yeah, I think when you're talking expensive, the capital cost on nuclear has always been more than coal plants or gas plants. I think coal plants are going to end up costing almost as much once you deal with clean coal and carbon sequestration. But the reason our plants are expensive is you have a lot of redundancy, a lot of safety systems.
Say something naughty about coal. Is clean coal an oxymoron?
I think clean coal is a real challenge because clean coal means I've taken the carbon, the other pollutants out, and I put them somewhere. And I think that's a real hard technical challenge. On the other hand, I think we will continue to have coal as part of our mix for a long time. I think nuclear will overtake it over the longer term, to be honest with you, as a base load.
After 3 Mile Island, which is going back, what, 30 years now or something, after 3 Mile Island, a lot of the lay supporters of nuclear, the non-technical people, were very disturbed. Here was a company that said they had everything under control. They had told me that many times when I was reporting on the subject. And then 3 Mile Island happened. And it was a very serious accident, although there was no loss of life. And the systems mostly worked, except the human systems didn't work as well. How did that come about? And how can we be sure today that that will not be repeated? The panic was extraordinary. People called me up and said, should I move to Florida? Should I drive my children? And I said, no, don't be silly.
Yeah, no, it's a hard way to learn a lesson. How did it come about? When I graduated college, which was before TMI, I think there was a lot of technical arrogance in our industry in that what you said is true. The systems worked well in protecting public health and safety, but we never paid a lot of attention to the operational aspects and the human. TMI was a real eye-opener, and it has changed everything. Our operators are in simulators every 5th week. We're in simulators more than airline pilots.
How do you keep people fresh when nothing's going wrong?
Well, this
is a big problem on transatlantic flights or trans-world flights.
You're right.
The Brits have done a lot of work on flights from London to Australia, where they put them on automatic pilot. When they finish discussing the sex life of the crew, they fall asleep.
Yeah, we don't seem to have that problem. But I tell you,
they don't talk.
They do talk. The funny thing that we have is boredom is what we like for our operators. Boredom is what we like for our security officers. But they're actually always doing something. They're reviewing procedures. They're checking gauges. They're doing things there. What they don't get to do, which is what we don't want them to have to do, is deal with some really bad situations. And that's why they're in simulators every 5th week.
What about the talent? Are you getting the engineering talent into the industry? In the 1960s, nuclear was as hot as computers later became. Every engineering student wanted to be in nuclear. It was the new frontier. It was enormously exciting. Right. It was the future, and suddenly it became something else.
Yeah, that's been a challenge. We've seen a turnaround over the last few years. We've doubled the number of engineering schools from 15 to 30 that produce nuclear engineers now in our country. Since 2002, we've almost doubled the number of students graduating each year. The nuclear Navy has always been a pipeline for us of talent coming into our industry. And one of the things that's nice about nuclear for recruiting people, and we are being successful, is one, we pay very high salaries. And two, you have a job, a very stable, excuse me, long-term job. So we are actually seeing a lot of turnover, but we're seeing a load of fresh people coming in. I have the pleasure of dealing with a lot of the new young people coming in at meetings, and it's really invigorating to sit there and deal with a bunch of 20-somethings who are really enthusiastic.
Do we have an indigenous nuclear vendor, somebody who builds the plants, designs any more? Westinghouse you mentioned, but it's in fact Japanese controlled now. Even General Electric is in a partnership with Japan, and the big competitor is Areva out of France, 100% French company.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is the global nature of the nuclear supply system has basically become really global everywhere. I mean, Westinghouse is building the 2 plants that we have going right now in Georgia and South Carolina. That is fundamentally being done, obviously, in America by Americans. So we do have an indigenous program going, but you're right, it's a very global infrastructure right now, and we need to grow ours more, and it's going to be somewhat difficult.
One of the things we hear about when looking at electricity these days, and hear about a great deal, is the smart grid. Yeah. As though this is the Lochinvar coming out of the West to save the electric utility industry. And yet, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's meter reading, it's analysis of consumption, and for some people, it's a spy in the kitchen, knowing when you take a shower and maybe who you take it with. How do you feel about the smart grid, and what's the nuclear relationship? Because nuclear's basic supply of electricity, it doesn't go up and down very well.
Right. I think the smart grid doesn't have a dramatic effect on nuclear. I think what you've said about the smart grid are characteristics of it. What the companies are finding on the smart grid is it helps them know about usage. Where it is helping is when you have an outage now, you can have smart grid stuff that's telling you the problem and where it is. But the smarter we make the grid, the more susceptible it is to cyber challenges. So I think that there is a challenge technically there that we need to really pay attention to.
Looking down the road, do you see a time when we'll return to the acceptance of nuclear as inevitable? Do you think that it will go back to the 1960s when plants were being ordered by every utility? There's a tiny, it's now been absorbed into another one, there's a tiny utility on the Delmarva Peninsula called, used to be called Delmarva. They ordered 12 reactors. Luckily, they never got built for that company. But there was this exuberance, this enthusiasm, this great sense that there was a wonderful new way to do everything, and it got lost. We still have that feeling about computers, but we don't have it about big engineering. We don't have it about anything in big engineering.
I think it won't be like the 60s, but I think it's going to be much better than it's been. We have 17 applications now for 22 reactors being reviewed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.